Could I talk a little bit about the oil industry though? Because I think that that's
Please.
just like an
I mean,
important.
as someone that worked in it, yeah, I spent some time in the Gulf.
Well, I'd love to hear your perspective.
It's one of more individual woe than it is of like I actually worked in North Dakota as well.
Those are some
There you go.
harrowing stories.
They're mine are very different, but and where I was, it wasn't union.
hmm And that's the rough bit about trying to unionize the sector, because I don't know what your situation was at that time, but a lot of the guys who do that kind of work, they don't always have the kind of connections. They're usually young guys, single, or maybe they have a kid, but the tenuous relationship there, and they just want to work for a bit and get out. Like they just want to make a couple years of good salary and then get out and do something else. And that makes unionizing parts of the industry like very difficult as an organizer. But like what happened in Texas, and this happened everywhere, but once the price of oil dropped during the COVID pandemic, who were the people who faced the brunt of the belt tightening? It wasn't the folks sitting in Houston, in the office, or Dallas, right? It
Same thing
was
happened in North Dakota.
no, exactly. They fired all across this
Everybody.
country. Hundreds of thousands of people were fired, or around 60,000. That's probably a conservative estimate. Were let go, and mainly people who work in the oil fields directly were let go at the beginning of the pandemic. All while the oil industry was getting massive subsidies and tax breaks from the government. Just like, as I know in the piece, like one of the companies, Houston National Oil Well Varco, got a $591 million, and they fired 22% of their workforce, right?
Damn.
And that's not even like, it was one of those things like, if you've written a piece with an editor, they cut things because it gets wordy. That wasn't even me just picking out like a striking example. He was like, it was like getting tedious because I was going through the companies and like noting how much money they got and how much of their workforce they dropped. I mean, it was egregious and it was pervasive throughout the industry. And the reason I wanted to note that is that like this is a visceral experience that people who are working in that industry just experience. That is a bit of a preview of what might happen potentially without like a real kind of just transition labor policy if we move away from fossil fuels. So like there's that fear there, right? And a lot of times, that kind of fear turns people against green policy, which is why the just transition framework is so important, because we can make the argument to them. These guys do not care about you. They will let you go at the first chance that they get. And if we can show them a sustained capability and commitment to fighting for them, then we have a lot more allies. But that's not the situation right now.
Well, let me ask you this: why
Yeah.
aren't we there making that argument? As again, these are environments where Fox News is 24/7, right? Regardless of whatever people think the racial makeup looks like, it's a lot more mixed than you think.
Oh,
in these
totally.
places.
This is most of Texas too. Just
I worked with a few Texas crews that came through. Even in North Dakota, a few Texas boys came through. I had to learn how to make you people's chili.
There you go. That's the good stuff.
But in all seriousness, conservative news is definitely the dominant news. But I would say most people, they're apolitical. Maybe a few of the older people that are homeowners are a little more political, but that's not really saying much. And I think their idea of any sort of green transitions include things running independently of their labor. It's just like, well, if you get this green thing, then you won't need me. And it's like, well, you're still going to need a guy to watch gauges. I mean, you get paid $3,000 a week to watch a goddamn gauge. I'm sure you can watch it if it's green.
Or Jason, like, they know how bad jobs are in wind and solar. Like wind and solar is not a good industry to work in right now. They pay very low, high rates of injury. I don't know the difference between that and the oil industry. I would imagine the oil industry might be a bit worse. But people know that it's not a good job, and certainly you're not getting paid for the risk, compared to what you're getting in an oil industry. And again, like just put it on the table, and you know this better than me. This is not to lionize the oil industry as some kind of mecca of employment either. I don't want people to make that mistake either. But, there are people who have been able to pull in decent amounts of income. And even if it's ideological, a lot of people, particularly in Texas, especially working class people, see that as a potential ticket out of, low wage work. So
Hell yeah.
it holds a mystique for people. And again, these are people who work in the industry and they know what it's like in the other kind of green industry. So those industries certainly need to change to be more attractive on the first bit. But the second aspect of this is these are also people who have skills that will be extremely necessary in any kind of a transition, in any kind of new system. And that's why we should be encouraging more labor leadership in the transition. And, just saying again, my friend Ryan Pollock, um, who I interviewed in the piece, he's a organizer here in Texas. He got the Texas AFL-CIO to endorse. They didn't call it Green New Deal because people are very inoculated against that phrase, but federal environmental policy, which effectively was a mirror of the Green New Deal when it comes down to the things that they were endorsing. So, and to do that, of course, Texas AFL-CIO, you're getting people who are in the energy industry. So there is support for the policy. But again, it's just like you have to turn these things from ideas on a sheet of paper that's being passed around into an actual into an actual commitment and possibility for folks.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.